Welcome to my video documentary on the past, present, and future of baseball. I decided to do my project on baseball because it's something that I've always loved and have always played. I thought it'd be interesting to dive into different aspects of the sport and create a future and a reality for the sport of baseball. Throughout the video, we will discuss the old ways of baseball, what it's like being a baseball player in today's world, and a day in the life of baseball for future years. Thank you. Let's begin. Baseball has always been known as America's pastime. The MLB started in 1876 in Cincinnati and originally featured only 8 teams, all U.S. based. Today, the MLB has 30 teams and is spread out across the United States and even into Toronto. But I'm not here to talk about the current state of the MLB. I'm here to talk about the past tools of baseball and how they impacted the game, and on top of that, how equipment affects player performance. When baseball first started in the late 1980s, the game was a lot different. There were no rules or regulations on any of the equipment that was used. Baseballs were made by local merchants, and there was no standard size or weight. Merchants would take a ball of yarn, wrap it into one big piece of leather, and tie it off with 4 distinct stitchings. These balls were known as the lemon peel baseballs. Eventually, they were made to the size that we see today, but it wasn't until 1854 that the 3 New York baseball teams met and settled on a standard baseball size. They decided that baseballs would weigh between 5.5 to 6 ounces and be 2.75 inches in diameter. This was the first real official baseball. One cool tidbit about the baseballs in this era is that it was tradition to give the winner of the game the baseball used in that game, which is still a tradition used today, the game ball. Baseball finally had an official size ball, and the sport could only grow from here. Of course, the baseball isn't the only part of the game, as there are countless other pieces of equipment that are used every day. The next essential piece of equipment is the bat. Baseball bats started as heavy and thick pieces of wood with one flat side similar to a modern-day cricket willow. The bats were originally any length and would have 2 knobs on both ends with special marks to differentiate the bats from one another. The bats were typically 48 ounces, which was decided by the baseball convention. It was eventually decided that the bats would be made of hickory ash instead of maple and pine. Bats were easily made back then and were not of the highest quality. There was no paint and no back grips, and players didn't even use pine tar until the 1970s. And of course, there were no such thing as batting gloves. With these bats, especially in the 1950s and 60s, hitters weren't producing nearly as many home runs. In 1950, the MLB only had 35 players hit over 20 home runs. The game just wasn't as exciting because players hadn't evolved and neither had the technology. Bats were made about as simple as possible because nobody had thought about how to improve them yet. Next, I'll talk about the glove, which is arguably the most important piece of equipment used in a baseball game. When baseball first began, the glove wasn't even a part of the game. Players would rather take a ball off the hand and be considered a man than use padding and be called a sissy. Finally, in 1870, people realized that gloves were a smarter way to play the game, as it cushioned the blow from the ball in the hand. The first glove wasn't even a real glove. It was just a padded piece of leather that was worn over the hand with no finger outlines and was strictly used as padding. By 1877, the first baseball glove was officially worn by Albert Spalding, whose glove still had no fingers, but the idea of a glove pocket had been created. By 1895, the National League and American Association voted that all players must wear a glove that weighed no more than 10 ounces and was no larger than 14 inches in circumference. The only players who were allowed to break this rule were first basemen and catchers, who had no regulations on their gloves. The equipment that players wore in the past just wasn't the greatest stuff. It was low quality and was really just used to get the job done. At the time, it seemed to be the best equipment available, but as the game continued to grow, so did the equipment. Players were limiting their abilities because of the equipment they had used. There was no such thing as composite bats, snakeskin leather, let alone brands like Evo Shield and Lizard Skin. As a result of this, the game just wasn't as exciting and players didn't perform at the level they do today. Even players like Hank Aaron, Roberto Clemente, and Frank Thomas were all able to succeed in this time. They would have been much more dominant had their technology been more advanced. In 1950, an MLB game averaged only 13,824 fans per game and had a total attendance of just over 1 million fans for the entire season. In 2022, these numbers are nearly doubled. This just goes to show that the game wasn't as exciting back then and the players weren't providing enough entertainment for the fan. Taplin talks about how technology controls all, and how we need to think about how technology controls the world. Comparing today's game to back then, you can truly see how much technology has impacted the game. When the technology wasn't as strong, the players performed less, leading to less of an interest in the game. Today, the equipment is definitely more different than the days of the lemon peel. The ways of the game have grown, and for young guys like me, I was fortunate enough to grow up in a great era of baseball. T. Nicola is another person who grew up in this era and is still playing today. T is a lifelong baseball fan and baseball player and Philadelphia Phillies fan. He has been around the game of baseball for as long as he's been alive. T grew up playing for his local teams in Blue Bell, Pennsylvania, and now plays for the Syracuse University club baseball team. Throughout his childhood, he played all the way from Cal Ripken All-Stars up until being a 3-year varsity player at Wissahickon High School. He now plays for the SU team as a pitcher and is currently the vice president of the club. As VP, he is one of the leaders on the team and is tasked with organizing practices and games, handling group fundraising, and making roster decisions on game days. To talk about the present technology and state of baseball, I wanted to speak to someone who had first experience with the sport and always had. Teague was the perfect option for this. I asked him a lot about his childhood experiences with the sport, what it's like being a Phillies fan, his time in high school, and the decision to attend SU and play club ball rather than pursuing a scholarship in college. He told me a lot about his childhood and how it really created his love for the game. He played for the Blue Bell Cal Ripken Baseball League growing up and was on their all-star team, which competed to win states and advance to regionals and nationals. Even though his team never won the state championship, he said that All-Stars was his first great memory of baseball that he had. Playing Cal Ripken is just an awesome experience. As a kid, there's nothing more fun than playing baseball every day with your friends and meeting the boys of summer, he said. Without even realizing it, it was one of the best times of my career, and I made some of my best friends. I still hang out with a lot of those guys to this day when I'm home, and Cal Ripken was definitely a huge start to all of those friendships. That's a huge part of baseball. It's truly a game that starts at a young age, and players develop such a special bond with it and the other players involved. I think Little League Baseball and Cal Ripken is 100% the best youthful sports league in the world, and every kid dreams of playing on ESPN, going to Williamsport, and participating in the League World Series. Teague never had that chance, but he also loves what the Little League World Series and what it stands for, baseball at its purest form. Another aspect of being a huge baseball fan was Teague's love for the Philadelphia Phillies. He has always been a massive Philadelphia sports fan for as long as he can remember, and the Phillies will forever hold a special place in his heart. I remember sitting in my house when I was just a kid and seeing the Phillies in the World Series with guys like Ryan Howard and Chase Utley, he said. Those early memories are what propelled Teague to be a Phillies fan for life and cheer them on even in the worst of their times during their 11-year playoff drought. This made me want to ask him how he has seen the overall sport of baseball change since those early Philadelphia World Series days. He replied with, I feel like in today's game, there's so much more swagger and players are so much more focused on themselves. I remember guys like David Ortiz and Chase Utley who are always just loyal to their teams, and I feel like nowadays you don't see that very often. I also feel like the overall talent pool of players is just so much higher now. I don't know if it's because of social media and there's just more awareness around young talent, or if they truly are more talented, but that's just how it feels to me. In my opinion, I think that these are both very valid opinions, but I think the loyalty issue is a huge one. I remember growing up a huge Red Sox fan, and for the most part, a lot of my childhood heroes were Red Sox for the majority of their careers. Nowadays, you see a lot more players prioritizing a huge check over loyalty to their teams. That's just the current state of the MLB and its athletes. Lastly, I wanted to talk to Teague about his decision to join the Syracuse club team coming out of high school. When I asked if he wanted to play competitive baseball in college, he replied, originally, yes. I played competitive travel ball all throughout high school, and I was trying to get recruited to play in college. Then in my junior year, I got hurt and decided not to pursue it anymore. It sucked because I had always wanted to play beyond high school, and then this injury kind of just decided for me that I couldn't. Even though T's original goals were lost, the club team at Syracuse gave him another chance to play the sport he loves. Syracuse Club Baseball is a team of 28 players that range from freshmen up to grad students. There isn't any coaching staff, but instead is operated like a standard on-campus club. The team elects a president, vice president, secretary, and treasurer. These 5 to 7 elected players become the leaders of the team and basically run the organization. The team competes in Division II of the National Club Baseball Association, and they typically play a total of 20 to 35 games in both the fall and spring semesters. I wanted to ask T about some of his experiences on the team, so I asked him what his favorite part of being on the team is. He said that he loves being on the team because it gives him a chance to continue to play the sport he loves with some of his best friends here at school. He loves being able to play with such a laid-back group of guys that are also seriously competitive and are part of a good team. The team travels for all their games in their own cars and occasionally stays in hotels when they're really far away. T said that these car rides and road trips are some of the best memories of being on the team. The club baseball team brings out the best in everyone on the team. It's all about continuing to play the game that they all love so much with their best friends. Teague is a perfect example of the human side of the sport of baseball. He has grown up with so much passion for the sport and has continued to play it to this day. Baseball may just be a sport, but for the people involved, it's so much more than that. It's a way of life that you truly never escape. As we all know, baseball has always been known as America's pastime. It has been the same sport that we all know and love and is an absolute American classic. Since 1876, people have played the sport, and for the most part, it has stayed relatively the same. Even though the physical tools of the game have changed and the athletes have continued to evolve their game, becoming faster, stronger, and more athletic, the overall idea of baseball has stayed the same. 9 players per side, 9 innings, and you win the game by scoring more runs than the opponent. But what if the game finally made some changes? The rules have always been 90-foot bases, wooden bats, some variation of a ball, and some variation of a standard baseball field. In recent years, Major League Baseball has recently been making huge strides to try and re-engage the younger audience and bring back excitement to the sport. Many people have lost interest in baseball and find themselves preferring more exciting sports such as football or basketball. But if the game changed, would this still be the same? The year is 2050 and baseball is no longer the same. David Ortiz III is a second-year shortstop for the Boston Red Sox. The game that he had always grown up playing was much different now. When he first heads to the field to warm up, he's no longer swinging the maple wooden bat that he had used for the majority of his playing time. The MLB has made a huge change. Major League Baseball has now completely switched to using only aluminum bats. The reasoning behind this was that it made the game more exciting as well as allowed athletes to perform better without breaking the rules. For the past 15 years, another huge PED breakout has occurred and the integrity of the game has been lost. This change allows players like Ortiz III to hit the ball much harder and further, bringing a lot more offensive firepower to their teams. Fans love to watch points and goals no matter what the sport is, and the MLB wants to increase the total runs scored by teams. They think this will bring in a whole other group of fans, and the game will be reborn. The game is also different in other ways now. First, players are a lot more rested. 5 years ago, in 2045, the MLB launched a new rule regarding extra innings and how they are played. One of the big issues with being an MLB athlete is the wear and tear that playing in a 162-game season takes on your body. A large part of this was because of how extra innings were designed. Baseball is a physically demanding game, and even without extra innings, it's usually a 2.5-hour game. This not only has a dragging effect on the fans, making the game unbearably long, but it's also a huge burden on the players and teams. Instead of playing extra innings, the MLB launched new rules that introduced a home run derby after the conclusion of a 9-inning game. Each team sends 2 players to the plate, and each will be given 10 swings to hit as many home runs as possible. The 2 teams have a swing-off, and the winning team gets the W for the game. Players like Ortiz III have publicly spoken out and said how much they love this new rule, as not only is it exciting, but it has saved a lot of players' long-term health and in-season health. The last change that the MLB has recently enforced is the removal of fielding rules and regulations. Back in 2023, the MLB banned the shift and enforced infielders to stay in the dirt and not the grass. Little did they know the negative effect this would have on baseball. Players were no longer making crazy plays and the game had become a lot more robotic. Now, in 2050, there are absolutely no rules on how the game is played defensively. When a power hitter is at the plate, teams can play a 4-man outfield and a 4-man infield, and when a team has a speedster up to bat, they tend to shift in with the hope to eliminate all holes for a ground ball to get through. This change has brought a lot of excitement back to baseball, and teams have been getting more and more creative with their defensive alignments. For a player like Ortiz III, it has allowed him to completely redesign his offensive attack as he is a power hitter, but finds himself bunting frequently to keep the defense on point. In conclusion, after these changes were made to the game of baseball, it's completely revolutionized the sport. These changes have completely changed the dynamic of the sport for the players and have added lots of excitement to the game that fans have called boring for years now. Baseball has been a game of tradition for years and will forever be America's pastime. I had a great time looking at the technology of baseball and how it changed over the years and how it can potentially change in the future years. I hope you enjoyed listening. Thank you.